Ibrahim Traoré was praying at Thomas Sankara's grave when he noticed something glinting beneath the headstone. In that moment, the fate of Burkina Faso and all of Africa would change forever. The military cemetery on the outskirts of Ouagadougou stood quiet under the pale morning sky. Dew still clung to the brittle blades of grass scattered among the humble graves, and the scent of moist earth hinted at the coming rains. Traoré had arrived just as the sun began to edge over the horizon, choosing the serenity of dawn to pay his respects before the capital awoke and the demands of leadership resumed. These visits to Sankara's resting place had become almost ceremonial since Traoré had assumed office. At the entrance, he'd asked his security team to remain behind with strict orders. These moments were not for cameras or staged reverence, but personal, spiritual. A solemn vow, renewed each month. Thomas Sankara, the fiery leader who had transformed Upper Volta into Burkina Faso, the land of the upright, had been murdered in a coup 35 years earlier. The betrayal came at the hands of Blaise Compaoré, once his closest ally, aided silently by foreign interests, including France. For years, Sankara had been buried in anonymity, his name and contributions erased from public memory. Only after Compaoré's regime collapsed was Sankara finally reinterred with dignity, his remains verified through DNA testing, and a modest grave constructed. The granite stone bore only his name, his birth and death, 1949 to 1987, and the quote that defined his legacy. "While revolutionaries as individuals can be murdered, you cannot kill ideas." Traoré knelt in front of the grave, his head bowed. At 34, he was still younger than Sankara had been when he died, and the responsibility of following in such monumental footsteps often weighed heavily. "I'm trying to walk your path, Capitaine," he murmured, using the affectionate name the people still gave Sankara. "But the obstacles now, they are massive." 8 months into his leadership, Traoré faced unrelenting pressure. Western governments condemned his nationalist agenda and strategic partnerships with Russia and China. Sanctions had begun to bite. France, once colonizer, now critic, had frozen aid after Traoré expelled its military presence. The IMF, too, was threatening to cut support unless he reversed policies and opened the economy to foreign control. Each passing day brought new hurdles, new attempts to sabotage his government's pursuit of true independence. In the quiet of his colonial-era presidential mansion, Traoré often questioned whether real sovereignty was possible in a world rigged to protect the status quo. As he shifted to stand, something metallic shimmered in the dirt near the edge of the headstone. Caught by the sunlight, it sparked his curiosity. Traoré crouched again and swept aside the reddish soil with his hand. Buried partially in the earth was a metal object. He gently pulled it out. A key. It was aged, slightly rusted, yet unmistakably unique, with intricate grooves etched into its handle. Then he noticed something else. The ground beneath the grave appeared to have been disturbed at some point, then refilled with care. Guided by instinct, he began digging, hands scooping the loose dirt aside. After several inches, his fingers hit something hard, a small rectangular box, roughly the size of a book, hidden beneath Sankara's grave. Excitement rising in his chest, Traoré unearthed it. The box was stainless steel, sealed tight against moisture, unmarked except for a tiny emblem of Burkina Faso's flag. The key he'd found slid neatly into the lock. With trembling fingers, he turned it. Inside, wrapped in an oilcloth, lay a leather-bound journal. Atop it rested a folded piece of aged parchment, yellowed by time but protected within the waterproof casing. Traoré opened it gingerly, The handwriting was instantly familiar. The bold, deliberate script of Thomas Sankara, still taught to students across the nation. "To the one who finds this," the note began, "if you are reading these words, you have uncovered what I could never say aloud. This journal contains the truths I carried, about our nation's true riches, our entanglements with the West, and a blueprint for liberation. This is only for someone who places Burkina Faso above comfort, above fear, above self-interest. If that's not you, bury this once more and speak of it to no one. If it is, let these pages lead you to where I never could. For the motherland or death, we shall prevail." It was signed simply, Thomas, dated October 14th, 1987, the day before he was killed. Magnitude of what he'd uncovered. Sankara had hidden this record with full knowledge that his life was in jeopardy, an act of foresight from a man who understood that truth, once written, could outlive bullets. The sound of distant voices snapped Traoré back to the present. His security team was calling. Moving quickly, he wrapped the journal and letter back in the oilcloth, placed them into the steel box, and concealed it beneath his jacket. He pressed the soil around the grave flat with his palms, doing his best to erase any sign of disturbance. "On my way," he called out, rising. As he walked away from Sankara's resting place, the weight of the box against his chest mirrored the burden of responsibility, now settling heavily on his shoulders. Back inside the presidential compound, safe in the confines of his private study, Traoré opened the journal with reverence. The first entry was dated 3 years before Sankara's assassination, shortly after he assumed power. "Today, I received confirmation of something that has shaken me deeply. What I suspected is worse than I imagined. The geological surveys produced by the French before our independence, which showed minimal mineral reserves in our territory, were falsified. The authentic documents, smuggled to me by a trusted contact in Paris, reveal extensive deposits of gold, uranium, manganese, and zinc, resources with the power to change our country's future." The journal continued, each page outlining revelations of systemic deceit by Western nations and the mechanisms they used to maintain African nations in economic subjugation. Sankara described the intricate machinery of neo-colonialism, debt traps, manipulated exchange rates, covert operations, and the use of foreign aid as a weapon. Most shocking were the supporting documents, tucked neatly between pages, photocopies of covert deals signed by former leaders, geological blueprints never shared with the public, and transcripts of secret meetings involving French authorities and industry elites. One document dated 1984 chronicled a strategy meeting. A French official had stated, "We must maintain the illusion of scarcity. If these nations knew their true mineral potential, they'd demand control, maybe even nationalize. We must control the narrative. That extraction depends on our money, our expertise." A mining executive had responded, "Sankara's troubling. He's asking the wrong questions, seeking original survey data. Perhaps we should nurture alternatives within his circle." Then came the entries that sent a chill through Traoré's spine, Sankara's growing suspicion that betrayal was near. "I am convinced now. My time is limited. Blaise has met with foreign officials. My security notes suspicious activity. Western media has turned against me, branding me a tyrant, a Marxist, a destabilizing force. These were the same signs before Lumumba, before Olympio, before Nkrumah, all leaders who dared to believe in a self-reliant Africa." The final pages matched what Sankara had described in his buried note, a sweeping strategy to achieve genuine African independence. It wasn't just a political vision, it was a master plan. Detailed frameworks for economic liberation, including nationalizing natural resources, establishing independent financial systems, growing food sovereignty, and defending against external interference. If this plan is implemented simultaneously across several African nations, Sankara had written, the usual tools of control will fail. They cannot overthrow all of us. They cannot impose sanctions on us all. They cannot assassinate every African leader. Unity is our weapon and the only path to freedom. As the night deepened, Traoré read every word, absorbing Sankara's hopes, fears, and unshakable belief in Africa's destiny. By dawn, he had resolved to act. In the days that followed, Traoré proceeded with quiet urgency. Only a select group of confidants, those he trusted beyond doubt, were shown the journal. Together they began shaping a modern plan, inspired by Sankara, but grounded in present-day realities. We need total silence, Defense Minister Ouagadougou said gravely, one of the few informed. If Western intelligence learns about this, they'll do to you what they did to Sankara, added Finance Minister Kabore, her tone tense. Traoré nodded. That's why we move fast, but smart. First step, confirmation. Under the cover of an agricultural development initiative, Traoré sent teams of geologists, trained not in Western institutions but in Russia and China, to the areas outlined in Sankara's hidden maps. Their equipment, camouflaged as farming tools, concealed their real purpose. Only team leaders knew the mission's true intent. The findings exceeded every expectation. Thanks to decades of scientific advancement, they identified reserves even greater than what Sankara's smuggled surveys had suggested. The gold deposits alone are nearly 3 times greater than what the official records indicate, reported Dr. Sawato, the lead geologist, in a classified meeting. The uranium reserves in the northern zone are among the most concentrated globally, and we've confirmed major lithium reserves, a mineral Sankara didn't even list, a resource once marginal, but now vital for global battery production. If we manage these resources properly, we can finance our nation's growth independently for generations, said Finance Minister Kabore, still visibly shaken by the discovery. No need for foreign loans, no dependency on aid, no hidden conditions. Which is exactly why this data was kept from us, Traoré added. But uncovering the truth is just step 1. According to Sankara's warnings, acting alone on this knowledge invites the same outcome he faced. Assassination, Defense Minister Ouagadougou murmured grimly. Or its modern-day forms, economic sabotage, rebel insurrections, and character assassination through the media. Traoré tapped the worn journal. But Sankara offered a solution, collective action, across nations. We can't do this in isolation. This next move required tact. Through confidential channels shielded from Western monitoring, Traoré reached out to trusted counterparts in neighboring states, Mali, Niger, Guinea, nations where recent political shifts had begun to question the neo-colonial order. I need to show you something, he said to Mali's interim leader during a coded video call. Something that could alter our path forward, but only face-to-face and under strictest security. Similar encrypted conversations followed with other regional leaders. Though hesitant, all were intrigued enough to agree to a covert gathering. 2 weeks later, a secret summit was held at a discreet military complex in central Burkina Faso. Leaders from 7 West African countries arrived in unmarked vehicles with no public notice or diplomatic fanfare. A joint security team, composed of loyal officers from each participating nation, managed all safety measures. Communications ran through secure networks built by a consortium of African tech developers. In a fortified underground chamber, Traoré laid out Sankara's journal and the verified resource findings. What you're proposing is nothing short of revolutionary, remarked Niger's president after long hours of dialogue. A total reset in how we engage with the global powers. This isn't my proposal, Traoré corrected. It's Sankara's vision, buried for over 3 decades because those before us weren't prepared to act. The question now is, are we ready? Guinea's leader leaned in. The timing couldn't be better. The global balance is already shifting. China, Russia, India, Brazil, they don't enforce the same colonial terms. And the West is distracted, Mali's president added. Energy crises, political divisions, mounting debt. They lack the coordination to mount a unified response. What about technical capabilities? Asked Senegal's leader, the most cautious among them. We've been taught we lack the skill sets to manage our own wealth. That's another colonial lie, Traoré replied. Our continent is rich in engineers, scientists, economists, but they serve Western corporations because we never had the infrastructure to employ their talents. We've already identified hundreds in the diaspora ready to come back and help build sovereign nations. For 3 days, the leaders deliberated, tailoring Sankara's ideas to today's political and economic realities. By the end, they had crafted what history would later name the Ouagadougou Pact, a sweeping framework for regional economic self-determination. Its core principles were bold: simultaneous declarations of national resource ownership with fair compensation but no compromise on sovereignty, immediate adoption of a shared currency backed by gold and key minerals to facilitate inter-African trade, redirection of exports to alternative global partners in Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America, a unified defense pact with shared intelligence to counter foreign intervention, and a coordinated public awareness campaign revealing the historic. As the final terms were agreed upon, Mali's president gave voice to a shared concern. The backlash will be intense. Are our people prepared for the hardships this might bring? Traoré lifted Sankara's journal. He wrote that the colonizers' most powerful weapon isn't their armies or economies, it's the illusion that we can't live without them. Our people have sacrificed for decades, sacrifices that fed foreign profits. Now, for the first time, those sacrifices will serve our future. The next step would be carried out with surgical precision. Quietly, each government began repositioning loyal personnel, securing strategic assets, and crafting contingency plans for what lay ahead. Contingency plans were quietly developed to anticipate likely Western retaliation. Economists crafted rollout strategies for the new monetary system, while military officials worked on regional defense coordination. Throughout this delicate phase, Traoré remained fully aware that surveillance was inevitable. Western intelligence networks had likely already flagged irregular communication spikes and unprecedented meetings among leaders who historically had little cooperation. Still, the exact objectives of the Ouagadougou Pact remained cloaked in secrecy. Only a select group knew about the journal. One evening, while Traoré worked late, his head of security entered with a grim update. Mr. President, we've observed suspicious signals from the French embassy. Their diplomatic corps has doubled in the last week, and new satellite images show increased troop movements at their bases in nearby states. They know something is coming, Traoré said calmly, but they're not sure what. There's more, the security chief added. We caught 3 separate infiltration attempts. Big bribes were offered to staff close to you. Traoré simply nodded. Move the schedule up. We act in 2 weeks. On June 15, 2023, exactly 3 months after discovering Sankara's journal, citizens across West Africa awoke to a synchronized announcement. In 7 different nations, presidents addressed their people on national television, declaring the full activation of the Ouagadougou Pact and the immediate steps being taken. In Burkina Faso, Traoré appeared before the nation, Sankara's weathered notebook in hand. People of Burkina Faso, I come to you today with truth. Truth denied to us for decades. We are not a poor country. We do not lack wealth. What we've lacked is ownership. He raised the journal for emphasis. 35 years ago, President Sankara unearthed damning truths, that our land surveys had been falsified, that shadowy deals had handed away our resources, and that our suffering was manufactured, not fated. Behind him, massive displays showed mineral maps, their monetary estimates, and shocking mismatches with official figures. Starting today, alongside our West African allies, we are taking back what's ours. Every mine now belongs to the people. A new currency, the Sankara, backed by real gold, will anchor regional trade, and exploitative partnerships will be replaced by equitable ones. As expected, the global backlash was swift. Western countries decried the move as unlawful expropriation. The IMF halted operations in all member nations. Sanctions followed. Western media ran stories predicting collapse, famine, and civil unrest. But something unexpected happened. African unity held firm. Instead of fracturing, more nations showed interest in joining. And the people, rather than falling into fear, rallied behind their leaders like never before. Even more surprising was the speed of international support from the global South. China, Russia, India, and Brazil quickly validated the nationalizations and extended favorable trade offers. Turkey unveiled a bold infrastructure investment plan. Iran pledged tech assistance for refining mineral resources. The transition was tough, but it wasn't chaos. Western companies withdrew, taking their personnel and expertise. But local professionals and expats stepped up, incentivized by competitive contracts offered by nationalized resource agencies. Banking limitations made transactions slower at first, but the Sankara currency began circulating regionally. New trade routes were established, and gold plus uranium exports brought quick capital inflow. 60 days into what Western headlines dubbed the African Resource Revolt, Traoré returned to the place where it all began, Sankara's final resting site. A quiet ceremony was held to unveil a new memorial in his honor. Standing before a crowd of citizens and dignitaries, Traoré lifted the original journal. "This book lit the path," he said. "But Sankara's true legacy lives not in ink, but in our actions, in the courage to carry forward what he started." He motioned to the assembled delegations from Africa and the wider global South. From one man's whispered hope here at this grave grew a revolution the world can no longer ignore. He paused, eyes sweeping the horizon. Sankara once said we must dare to imagine the future. Today we aren't just imagining it, we are building it, side by side. The sculpture was revealed. Sankara immortalized in bronze, his arm extended forward in determination. At the statue's base, engraved in stone, was his most iconic phrase, finally made real in the boldest way possible. Everything that man can imagine, he is capable of creating. As the crowd dispersed, a small girl walked toward Traoré, proudly holding a handmade flag of Burkina Faso. "Mr. President," she said. She spoke with sincerity in her voice. "My teacher says that because of what you discovered, I might grow up in a different Africa than my parents knew. Is that really true?" Traoré bent down to meet her gaze directly. "And what's your name?" he asked. "Mariam, sir." "Well, Mariam," he replied gently, "your teacher is right. But this change didn't begin with what I uncovered. It began when, after years of being told we couldn't survive on our own, we finally chose to try. That same night, deep within a secure chamber beneath the presidential palace, Traoré convened a confidential meeting with the leaders who had signed the Ouagadougou Pact. The mood was focused, with a quiet confidence in the air. "The first stage has surpassed our projections," Mali's president reported. "Economic disruptions have been contained. Public morale remains high. Western backlash, though intense, has been fragmented and mostly ineffective." "And our extraction capabilities?" Traoré asked. "Output dropped by 40% after Western companies pulled out," replied Guinea's president. "But we've already recovered to 70% capacity, and we're climbing steadily. We anticipate surpassing past production levels by year's end, this time with the revenues staying home. Niger's president added, "The most unexpected benefit has been in science and tech. Once our experts started collaborating without Western oversight, we realized we had more knowledge and skill than we gave ourselves credit for." Security? Traoré inquired, turning to the military leaders. "There have been attempts," Mali's defense chief confirmed. "Recruitment of mercenaries in nearby nations, increased drone surveillance on our borders, suspicious activity at Western military outposts, but our joint intelligence network has managed to preempt most threats." "And Phase 2? Asked the Ivory Coast president, the most recent to join the alliance. Traoré opened Sankara's journal, flipping to a section he'd marked. Sankara wrote that reclaiming our resources was just the groundwork. The true structure comes after: educational systems that empower African innovation, healthcare tailored to our realities, farming strategies that guarantee food independence, industry that refines our resources here at home. He shut the journal with care. In short, we evolve from symbolic independence to true autonomy. 3 months after the pact took effect, Ibrahim Traoré took the podium at the UN General Assembly in New York. Though some Western delegates had threatened to leave, curiosity kept them seated. "I come before you not just as a head of state," he began, "but as the leader of a nation that is finally sovereign. Not sovereignty based on flags or borders, but sovereignty rooted in the ability of a people to control their assets, shape their economy, and define their own future." He continued with calm conviction. "For decades, our relationship with the West has been framed as charitable. Your aid, your expertise, your investments portrayed as lifting us from poverty. The reality, which we now face head-on, is this. That arrangement enabled the greatest wealth extraction in recorded history, from our continent to yours." The chamber was hushed. Delegates from former colonial powers sat still, many shifting uneasily in their seats, and so, from the dust of history and the shadows of exploitation, a new dawn rose over Africa. Not one gifted by outsiders or shaped by foreign hands, but forged by the will of its people, resilient, united, and unafraid to reclaim what was always theirs. The Ouagadougou Pact was never just a political agreement. It was a declaration that Africa would no longer ask for permission to dream, to lead, to thrive. As Sankara once envisioned, the continent began to build not just structures of industry or governance, but of dignity, self-worth, and collective purpose. Classrooms echoed with ideas born of African minds. Fields bore crops sown with independence. Laboratories lit up with innovation. And from the mountains of Guinea to the coasts of Senegal, the heartbeat of a free Africa grew stronger. This is more than a story. It's a beginning, a reminder to the world. Africa was never lacking. It was always rising,